Greetings, YouTube. I was reading a thread on Farc this morning. I frequent Farc. I'm not a commenter on Farc for the most part. I actually don't own, but I have a login. I don't think I've ever used it. But I do often find it entertaining and, hauntingly enough, sometimes far more civil than YouTube comments. YouTube comments really are some of the worst I've ever seen. The only thing I think I've seen worse than YouTube comments have been some comments on news articles on the union leader. They were really horrible. But Farc is often entertaining. I call it a high noise to signal ratio because you often get a lot more static than you get real signal, as opposed to, say, Metafilter, where you get a lot of signal and less static. But it's awesome and entertaining, so I go to Farc usually just to be entertained. But this morning there was an article about the use of the word transgendered, ed at the end, and that's not correct. The term is transgender. Transgendered is not the proper use of the word transgender, or a version thereof. And surprisingly, the article that they were linking to on Farc actually explained that this wasn't so that was kind of nice. But in the course of the thread under that article, there was a whole lot of chaos and confusion. And there was a whole lot of, this is what you are, this is what you are, being said by people who had never, ever once in their lives felt anything but they perfectly suited the gender and the sex they were assigned at birth. So they're comfortable in their own skin, telling a whole bunch of other people that you should just accept what you are. At the same time, denying their right to have people tolerate and accept them for what they are. It was horrible. If I were to actually comment, I would have asked, how many fedoras do you own? But that's beside the point. And it got me thinking about a graphic I had looked at. Graphic in the sense of a descriptive image, as opposed to graphic in the sense of horrible or explicit. A graphic I had seen, I think it was last year, maybe 2 years ago, called the Genderbread Person. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. As the title of this video will probably have already given you a clue. The Genderbread Person is an image of the classic gingerbread person cookie. So it looks like a cookie. It's just called the Genderbread Person because it's using that image to help people understand the differences between gender identity, gender expression, biological sex, and sexual orientation. Because these are separate entities. And a lot of people have these all kind of crumpled up inside their head as this one big ball, and it isn't. It is far more complicated than that, just like humans. Humans are far more complicated. Humans don't often function in a binary situation. So, the image, and I'm going to link to it, obviously. The image shows the gingerbread person here, a nice little smile on their face, and it shows a brain, a heart, a symbol at their genitals, and then an encompassing graphic that shows it's concluding the entire entity itself. So it first talks about gender identity, which is between man, woman, and genderqueer in the center, which is someone who is gender fluid, is agender, someone that simply refuses to identify themselves as a gender at all. There's a number of different versions of genderqueer, but that's okay. Like I said, humans are complex. Next, they're talking about gender expression. And this is how you are presenting yourself physically to the world. Okay, I'm wearing a sweater and a hat. All right? Neither of these things have any gender expression clues. This hat could be worn by anyone. This sweater could be worn by anyone. Now, if I'm wearing a suit and a tie, in Western culture, most places in the world, that is a gender expression of masculinity. But that's just because that's what society says it is. That doesn't say, that's not like we're not born knowing that. It's the lessons we learn as we grow up within a culture. So you have the masculine and the feminine. So if I were in a dress at the moment, people would say, well, you're expressing your femininity. Well, the dress is just a dress. Clothing doesn't have a gender. It's what we assign to that clothing that is important. So some people can appear as masculine, some can appear as feminine, and then you have people in the middle, which is the androgynous. And they can really confuse people because people are like, they're a boy, they're a girl. It's a simple rule when you are in public and you don't know the gender or can't identify the gender expression of someone. So it's a simple step process, okay? Step 1, it doesn't matter. Done. There's no step 2. Then we have biological sex. And biological sex is what is in our chromosomes. So male, female, or intersexed. And intersexed is a wide range. As much as 1% of humanity is intersexed in a significant manner. So like you could literally, like there could be someone that appears to be biologically female but could have testicles inside her own system. So the most famous person I can think of is Jamie Lee Curtis. She's intersexed. There are many others, but and you probably don't know your own biological sex unless you've had a chromosome test done to show you. But the reality is that most of us appear a certain way. Our genitals are a specific type, and we just kind of go for it. We don't worry about it because it doesn't matter to most people. I appear male. I've never questioned that. Don't worry about it. I know I function as a male. Woo! So that's great. But there are many people in the world that are not distinctly male and female. And the last we have here is the sexual orientation. And sexual orientation falls in the spectrum between homosexual and heterosexual, and of course right in the middle are bisexual. Now, one of the things that is, I think, very important to understand is a bisexual person isn't 50% straight and 50% gay. That's not how it is. I saw a great image not long ago that showed a vanilla cone and a chocolate cone, and then it showed one that was a swirl. And that's how most people view bisexuality. They say it's a swirl of straight and gay, but it's not. And the next graphic showed a vanilla cone and a chocolate cone, and then it showed a strawberry cone. That's bisexual. It's its own thing. It is unique. And even if you identify as heterosexual or homosexual, it is quite possible for a person to have sex with someone outside that identification, outside with that orientation, and not have it mean that they're bisexual, or not have it mean that they're something other than what they're identifying as. There are some people who will say they're heterofluid, as in they're most of the time they prefer heterosexual sex, but there are times when they don't prefer heterosexual sex. I'm heterosexual. Have I had non-heterosexual encounters? Yes. They weren't voluntary, but they did exist. I'm still identifying as heterosexual. There are people out there that will argue that homosexual people are the victims of child abuse and that's why they're this way. By that logic, because I was sexually abused by both a woman and a man, I should be bisexual. But that isn't logic. That's just bigotry. And I'm not bisexual. I'm straight. So all of these things can help us understand other human beings. The next argument I often hear is like, well, I don't care about these things. If someone looks like a guy, I'm going to call him a guy. Okay, call him like a guy. But if they ask you to refer to them as something other than he or him, respect that. If they don't say anything because they agree with you, you refer to me as he or him, I'm going to agree with you. Or because they haven't gotten to the point in their life where they're willing to tell you, by the way, please call me they or them, or call me she or her. You're not at fault there. But if someone looks like me and asks you to refer to them as they or them, respect that. If they ask you to refer to them as she or her, respect that. It isn't your name. It isn't your identification. If I change, my name is James. If I had it legally changed to Frank, and I ask you to call me Frank from this point on, and you refuse to call me Frank, you're being a douche. I have decided that my name is no longer James. Cool. That's my right. Heck, I could start calling myself Frank right now legally, and it would be okay as long as I'm not trying to evade legal repercussions or commit fraud. So I could just call myself Frank from now on, and it would be legal. As long as I do not try to pass myself off as Frank when it came to legal signing documents and laws and suits and things like that. And there's nothing stopping me from doing that. So if I change my name, if I ask you to start calling me Frank, and you continue to call me James, you're being a douche. I've expressed I don't want to be called that anymore. Please stop. Well, it's the same thing if someone says, call me he or her or she or they or them, and those pronouns are not what you would necessarily associate with them by their expression. Now, a person could be a trans woman or a trans man, and they could be expressing themselves in such a manner that you will naturally default to their preferred pronouns. But again, if they ask you to refer to them as they or them, do it. Just do it. It's just decency and respect. It is not rampant political correctness. No. It's decency, civility, and respect. I'm not forging new ground here. It's no different than calling someone by the name they want to be called. My name is James. I prefer James. If you call me Jim, and I ask you not to call me Jim, and you continue to call me Jim, that makes you a douche. Now, there are people in my life that still call me that, basically because they called me that since I was a child, and I'm not fighting it. My parents call me Jim. My sister calls me Jim half the time. Sometimes she calls me James, which makes me smile, because she legally had her name changed. And I use the new name without question. So yeah, sometimes things don't work out the way that they think they will. And the irony is often biting. But it's just decency. That's it. Again, this is nothing new. No one is asking you to revolutionize your thinking. They're simply asking you to treat them the way they want to be treated. And if it isn't something you're comfortable with, I'm sorry. You have my sympathy, my empathy, and my compassion. But your discomfort is not an excuse to be disrespectful to another human being. Sorry, it just isn't. And if you're loud and proud about that disrespect, I will judge you, and it will not be favorably. So just think about this. Go look at the graphic, save a copy. It's very helpful, and it might help you in future conversations with people. This graphic might help people who are listening to this who don't fall into an obvious expression, binary. If you'd like to be called something that isn't apparent, you prefer to call they and them, maybe this graphic will help explain the situation to someone in your life. Okay? You got every right to be respected. And if someone doesn't respect you, cut them out of your life, man. I don't care if you have known them forever. If their disrespect for you is painful, just leave them behind. You deserve respect. You deserve to be treated with tolerance and acceptance. You are worthy of it. You are worth it. And don't let anybody tell you different. So tell me, where do you fall in the genderbread person spectrum.